This is the intimate version of the panel. Thank you for coming second because we'll get more time to talk. I'm Seth. We're going to see if we can make the slides work. There we go. So ostensibly we're here to talk about design. And a lot of times when you talk about design, instantly you get talking about bad design, design that makes no sense, design that makes us extremely uncomfortable. That's not the design that I wanted. Some people over here are just figuring that out. That's not the design I want to talk about. I want to talk about how is it that this became the best bike in the world, the best designed bike in the world, the fastest bike ever made. How is it it's just now, after 100 years of bikes coming out? And that's Maria driving it. She invented the bike. She's riding across the country now for charity to raise money for cancer research. This bike is 20% faster than any other bike made. She holds the world speed record for women. There are two things that are interesting about this. One is technically you couldn't have made this bike 30 years ago. The other thing that's really important that is at the heart of what I want to talk about is from a marketing and market point of view, you couldn't have brought anything like this to the world 30 years ago. If we think about cars, and here we are in Detroit, why not? You go to any suburban mall and you see the sea of sameness. That for a really long time, a car has been a mass market item. And the reason is to do with this guy, the most important person in the 20th century, Henry Ford, founder of this company. Henry Ford made us all rich. And the way he did that was by pioneering productivity and mass production and interchangeable parts. Henry Ford went to the workers of Detroit, the men of Detroit. He said, if you're making 50 cents a day, I will pay you $5 a day to come work for me. A 10x raise in one day. How could Henry Ford afford to do that? He could afford to do it because he had a system. He called it the Ford system. He wrote a 4-page article in the Encyclopedia Britannica about this. And the Ford system was about scale and reliability and figuring out how to become efficient. The River Rouge plant, which is right down the road, so big that if you started at one end, it would take you all day to walk to the other. Ford had Ford shepherds who raised Ford sheep to make Ford wool to be woven into Ford fabric to put in Ford cars. And he could do that because he made a car for everyone. The Model T was twice as good and 1/4 the price of every other car. And that created a design tradition in this country. And the design tradition was if you could make something that was twice as good and 1/4 the price, function could make you win. And you've all seen this. This is the product adoption life cycle. This shows who buys what when, right? And what you see is that Ford made a car for everyone. That the magic of what happened in this company 70 or 80 years ago was something for everyone. Mass market. You know what mass market means? Average stuff for average people. And what we learned from that, all of us learned from that, is that function. If you could make it functional, that was what design was. And so we're still hooked on that. How do you make it better? So we look at the cockpit of the 747 and we say, yeah, functional. But one of the things you'll notice is that's actually not true. All the letters, when you get on your plane to fly home, ask to look in the cockpit, all the letters on all the labels are in all caps. And the reason they're in all caps is in the 1950s, the machine that carved the letters could only carve in all caps. But they're still in all caps. And they're still in all caps because it reminds pilots of the planes they flew in when they were younger. And the story we tell ourselves is more important than function now. Because we can't make something twice as good and 1/4 the price anymore. We are left with the story. So if you hand a kid a pencil, if you hand an adult a pencil, they're not going to say, oh, a writing implement. They're going to remind it of the smell of the pencil sharpener and taking the SAT and the anxiety of it. The story we tell ourselves is actually what is being sold. And that story is infected and affected by who our grandparents were and what they grew up with, but also by the rest of media. So when John DeLorean made this car, he talked about how it doesn't rust and how it's stainless steel. No one bought it. But now when we see this car, all we remember is the movie. And we remember where we were when we saw that movie and how that movie made us feel and who we were with. That media and culture changed the way we see the story, and the story is the design. So if you think about auto shows and concept cars I just learned this is fascinating to me. Why don't they ever bring out the cool cars we see at the auto show? It turns out that car manufacturers intentionally bring concept cars to auto shows 5 years before the real car is going to come out to soften us up, to change the culture, so that when the real car comes out, it reminds us of the thing that's underlying the way we look at the world. But the real punchline here, the real change, the thing you have to understand as a media company and that your readers need to understand is this. This is the normal distribution. And the normal distribution is called that because you want to reach the people in the middle, the normal, the masses. How do I reach everybody? How do I get everybody to read my blog? How do I get everybody to buy my car? Everyone to see my movie? And that worked for a really long time because there were limited media choices. There was a mass market. But what's happening just now on our watch is the curve is melting. The curve is melting, and now bit by bit there's more on the outside of normal, the weird, than there is on the inside. That our entire culture, once we have everything that we want, our needs become ever weirder. Not with everything we need, our wants become ever weirder. That we want what we want. That when you give people a choice, they will take it. What this means is that the long tail is there. If you like Jamaican polka music, you're going to listen to Jamaican polka music. That I can't force you to listen to top 40 because you can listen to whatever you want. That means that any TV show that's on today has ratings that wouldn't make it in the top 100 if it had been on in the 1970s. It means that the #1 brand in almost every category is other. It means that all media is optional. And we will not look at your ad if we do not want to. We will not read your media if we do not want to. And it means that it's easier than ever to create something that people choose to talk about, because almost everything else will be ignored. So if we think about how Apple goes to market, this is their new computer. It doesn't look like a computer. It looks like a story. It looks like something that reminds us of something else. So the challenge that we have as designers, as people who want to influence the culture, as people who want to make a difference, is really simple. We can no longer say form follows function. That's ridiculous. Because we all have function now. We can all make stuff that's good enough. No, what we have to understand is that what the business we are in is the business of telling stories. Not stories to everyone at the same time, but stories to a few people who want to hear them. And if we give them a story that's remarkable enough, they will tell that story to other people. And so, the challenge and the opportunity is simple. The challenge is not how do we figure out how to be successful, but how do we figure out how to matter. And the way we matter is by connecting people with a story that resonates, a story they care about, and a story they'll tell other people. Now, with that foundation, we're going to move forward because I'm super excited about this panel. Some extraordinary people are here who have some interesting stories to tell you. First, I'll bring up my new friend, Jay Ward from Pixar.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Seth. Good stuff. My name's Jay Ward, and my title is the Cars Legacy Guardian for Pixar Animation Studios, which is just a fancy way of people asking me, what's a Cars Legacy Guardian? I'm basically John Lasseter's eyes and ears on any Cars-related products. So theme parks, video games, publishing, consumer products, even authenticity for our films. I look at all our movies and make sure that the things that are automotively related are accurate and authentic. At Pixar, we have a big thing about authenticity in everything we do. When you go see Finding Nemo, we want to make sure that the ocean life underneath the water is beautiful and vibrant and the kind of fish that would live in that area. When you watch WALL-E and you go out into space, we want to make sure that it looks the way space looks, the accurate way that stars form in this beautiful way. And all these stories come from this place, Pixar Animation Studios. We're in Emeryville, California. We're in the Bay Area. We are 350 miles away from Hollywood. We are as far from LA and California pretty much in a lot of ways as you can get, both physically and also metaphorically. Our studio is a different kind of film studio in a lot of ways, started by a person who thought differently. So it's these three guys. This is the core, the genesis of what Pixar is. You have Ed Catmull, who was the brain of Pixar, is the brain of Pixar. This is the guy who was doing amazing things with computer technology and rendering back in the 1970s. Incredibly intelligent, articulate man. He's our quiet Beatle. We have, of course, Steve Jobs in the middle, who was the body of Pixar. This is the guy who made it happen. This is the guy who bought Pixar from George Lucas and paid money out of his own pocket for years and years and years until the studio finally found a way to make money with this technology that we had. We used to make hardware, we used to make software, we did medical imaging equipment, we did all these things before we finally got around to making films. And that's where the heart comes in, and that's where we got this guy, John Lasseter, the heart of Pixar Animation Studios. So with this brain, this body, and this heart, we made the studio that just works. And when you look at our slate of films, now we're on feature film number 14, Monsters University, which came out on Friday. It's a pretty impressive slate of films. It's rare, it actually never happens in Hollywood, that one studio can make this many great iconic films in a row. It doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't just work out that way. It takes a lot of work, but more importantly, it takes this vision of what you want your studio to be. And for John, this is his big mantra, is that story is king. Telling a story is king. That's first present. If you don't have a great story, you don't have a great movie. And John always says it takes just as much time and effort and work and money to make a bad movie as a good one. So you might as well make a good one. So in this story, we want to tell a compelling story. It's something that keeps people on the edge of their seat, wondering what's going to happen next. Got to have that, a great story. You want to fill that story with these really relatable characters, these memorable characters, these ones that you can connect with. Even the bad guys, you get who they are. And it doesn't matter if it's a fish, a robot, or a car, or what have you. It's a character that you can relate to, that you can engage with. And then you're going to take those characters and you're going to put them into a believable world. Not necessarily a real world, but a believable world. I always have kids coming up to me and saying, can you show me where Radiator Springs is on the map? Is it Arizona or is it New Mexico? We made the town up, folks. It's not a real city. But people believe that because when you watch our movies, it's a believable place. You want to see Radiator Springs. You want to see those cars come alive, right? So then knowing those things, I have to ask myself in my job, what is it that I want from everything that we make, everything that we do? What are the things that come out of our films? What is it that I want out of those things? I want three simple things. I want quality, I want innovation, and I want storytelling. That's the three things I want from every product we make related to a Pixar movie. Quality, innovation, and storytelling. I'll just show you some examples. In the movie Cars, you guys have probably seen the Cadillac range, this beautiful range in the background. In the world of cars, no humans exist. So when the cars look up into the clouds, what do? They see car parts. We might see a human face or a bunny rabbit. They see automotive things. When we built Cars Land down in California Adventure, John said, I want to bring the world of cars alive, an immersive experience. I don't want an attraction. I don't want a ride. I want a land, a complete land. The way Walt Disney thought about lands. If you look at Disneyland, there's a hub and spokes, and each one of those spokes take you into a land. And he said, I want Cars Land to exist the way it does in the movie. That's Cars Land. That's the Cars Land version. Those are 150 feet tall. And the reason they're so big is to cover up the power lines on the street behind them so that when you're in Cars Land, you don't see the power lines of Anaheim, you see the Cadillac range. Maters, tow yard, right? Tow Maters. We wanted Tow Maters to look exactly the way it looks in the movie, to get the feeling that you know where you are, and you put it on the same place in the street that where it is located in the movie. You start from the four corners of Radiator Springs and you move out from there. Sally's Cozy Cone, again, dead on, 100% accurate. It's got quality, it's got innovation, it's got storytelling, right? I love this quote from Steve Jobs. He says, I only want to make the good stuff and I want to make less of it. He wasn't worried about making a lot of stuff. He just wanted to make everything he did the best it could possibly be. How many iPhones does Apple offer? 1 or 2. How many laptops? 3, maybe 4. Everything they make is the best it can possibly be. They don't have a huge line of product. They have a great line of product that makes you want it. So what is that? It's basically quality over quantity. Less, but better, right? So now I'm going to take those mantras and I'm going to look at a product. Let's take, for example, if you guys saw the movie Brave, the main character was a girl named Merida, a beautiful girl. And Disney's going to come to me and a toy maker's going to come to me and they're going to say, we want to make this product. Let's look at all this stuff and see what we want to make. Let's just take, for example, a toothbrush. Okay, so the first question I ask them is, why are we making this? First question. Believe it or not, a lot of times they go, I don't know, I guess because we've always made it. That's not the answer I want to hear. Why are we making this? Well, it's a toothbrush. Kids got to brush their teeth. They love our characters. This makes them brush their teeth with the characters. Great, you got a good answer for that. Now I'm going to ask you, how does this further the Pixar story? It's a toothbrush, great, but how does this relate to Merida? Did you think about making the bristles red like the color of Merida's hair? Did you think about putting a face on the toothbrush that looks like Merida, so when the little girl stands it up on the countertop, she's looking at Merida, her favorite character? Maybe you could have a miniature bow and arrow that shoots a toothpick, I don't know. Something cool that furthers the storytelling, right? Does it grow or enrich the brand? Does it take what we started, that drop in the water, and does it add to it, right? And then finally, if it doesn't do these things, then why are we doing it? If you're making product just to sell things to make money, I'm not interested in that. Just go make it. Don't even bother involving me. But if you really want to grow the story and do something engaging to grow that world, I'm in. I want to help you do that. I want to work together to do that. I'm going to show you a cool product you guys have probably never seen. This is only sold in Japan. It's called Henshin Mater. Henshin is the Japanese word for transform. This is transforming mater. It literally is a little rolling mater with a tow rig that transforms and pops and comes apart and turns into an oil rig playset with an articulating ramp, winches, cranes. It's the most amazing toy ever. It's extremely expensive. You can only get it in Japan. It's for Japanese people who appreciate quality. This toy sells very well. It's still on the shelf selling well. It won Toy of the Year at the Tokyo Toy Fair. This was a great example of working with a partner that cared about quality, innovation, and storytelling. And working together, we came up with this great product that I'm totally proud of. Video games, another thing we do, right? Storytelling in video games. They came to us with a game idea and they had all the characters with all these guns shooting everybody and blowing everything up. And I'm, whoa, time out, time out. What's the story? Why are all the characters doing that? Well, they're all spies. Well, they're not all spies in the movie, right? So why are you doing it? Well, give me a good backstory. So they came up with this virtual training academy. Chrome was this spy academy where you basically went on a holodeck and you did a virtual training exercise. You weren't really blowing up the other cars. You were virtually doing it and then they'd reappear again. I like that a lot better. Another example of storytelling, right? The life-size cars. We built these with State Farm. Incredibly expensive, incredibly detailed, made from our digital data, output from our digital data to make these characters. They actually have sounds, engine sounds. They rumble when they move. The lights come on them. People are hiding in the back with remote controls and can drive the cars into place and it sounds like they're running. Obviously they're electric. But what a cool idea. It's bringing the characters to life. It's bringing the storytelling to life in full size, accurate scale. The kids just freak out when they see these things. It's great. Now really quick, here's how we like to work at Pixar. One word, iteration. Iteration to us is that working back and forth with that partner, that Merida toothbrush, that life-size car, that Henshin Mater. It's working back and forth together so that we successfully, as we work back and forth together, we're making a better product in the end. That's what I want. The successive back and forth leads to a better product. What I don't want is you just lob it over the fence, right? So what I want is show it to me early. Show it to me often. I want to see it before you go too far down the road. Right? I want to see rough and dirty before you go to a final thing, before we move forward. I want to see it on the back of a napkin. A great example was Kingdom Hearts. It's a video game in Japan. It's pretty huge. They've had a Disney version of Kingdom Hearts for a long time. They wanted to add Pixar. Great. They said, we have this cool concept we want to talk to you about. We're going to fly you over to Tokyo. Let's talk about the game. Went over there with our video game guys and sat down in this conference room in Tokyo. And they handed me a 250-page, beautifully drawn packet. 250 drawings. They must have had this guy working for 6 months doing these drawings, and guess what? Bad concept. I shot it down. 250 drawings, 6 months of a person's work down the toilet. All he would have had to have done was drawn one sketch and said, here's what we want to do, and we could have gone together iteratively and got to that result that would have worked. Instead, they had to start all over. Basically, I want that pencil sketch before you draw the whole book. That's what I ask for, right? People always say, oh, it's Pixar, you only got to show them the best. So they bring this stuff that's too perfect. I want to draw over sketches and work together, right? This is what I ask for with every partner we work on stuff. I want more than one idea or approach, so if I do shoot it down, what's your backup plan? You got a plan B? Half the time they don't, right? You put all your eggs in one basket. But the good news is that these bad ideas can be fuel for good ideas. Out of these bad things can come something good, and we actually, improve these things along the way. We learn that. That's a quote from Andrew Stanton that I love. So the agreement is, it's not done till we both agree that it's right. You're happy with it, and I'm happy with it. That's how I want to make product, that you look at it and you go, it's as good as it can be, and I can say, yeah, I love it just the way it is. You love it, great. Then we're done. Not just me liking it, you have to like it too. I have what I call the basic rule of bookends. And that is, we're writing a book together. Whatever the product is, it's a book, it's a story we're telling together in this product, right? So I want to first know, what is this buy-off? What is this idea that you're making? And I want to agree with you on what this book is about. As we go along, we're going to review the chapters, we're going to look at those things, and I'm going to go back and forth. That's that iterative process. And obviously, in the end of it, you're going to have a final review. We're going to look and go, yep, we agree. This is the book we wrote together. Perfect. At that point, I can't change the game and go, let's make it something different. We've agreed on what it is. So I just want to share with you guys a little bit. That's how we like to work at Pixar, on product, on design, on everything we do. And the last image I want to show you, this is John Lasseter sitting in my Model A Hot Rod Roadster. This was for Wired Magazine about 6 years ago. And this is a 29 Ford I have. And John had a choice of all these cars to pick to be sitting in for this magazine shot. And he chose my clunky little Model A Roadster because it had a story to tell. And he just said, your car has a story with it. And when you look at that car, it fits perfectly with what I want for cars. And so I thought that was fun to leave you with. And that's all I've got. So thank you very much. Thank you. I want to introduce the head of design at Ford, good friend of mine, Mr. J Mays.
As you'll see, we have very many similar letters in our name. The two J's will be known as J1 and J2 in a few minutes. Okay, I want to talk about how an auto designer actually becomes an author designer. And it's an interesting idea. Most people think car designers just sketch up ideas and something turns out to be pretty. Pretty has nothing to do with it. And I want to talk a little bit about how design tells a story this morning. In automotive design, usually design tells a story by beginning with seduction. And I'm a believer in visual communication as opposed to verbal communication. That's the message that's sent to someone when they view your design and they understand it and they read it because they're looking at that and doing a visual analysis. So how do you become emotionally connected to the product? And what's the product's story? That's what really interests us inside of Ford. We connect with people through design. And as we become more technically driven, the emotional connection becomes even more important. So we utilize who our customers are, who we are, where they work, how they play, what their history is, who their parents are, what's their cumulative memory, and all of that has a lot to do with how they connect with design. So every design we do should have its own style, its own message, its own contribution to the story. Now, we're car designers, so we love form, and form is one very small part of a larger overall visual design language that we use to communicate with with customers. And done correctly, every element we design and every design we generate creates some sort of emotion and some sort of reaction from the customer. Now, becoming a better storyteller is at the heart of being a designer. And the storyteller designer asks about motivation, what's on the customer's mind in terms of design. We create experiences that hopefully have meaning for that customer. And I'd like to show you now 3 very short animations that were put together by our design studios on how we get there. Now, I've always argued that people purchase products because they're prepared to spend a part of their life with it. It's an emotional decision. It has nothing to do with logic. It's a bit like falling in love. You don't fall in love with someone for inherently practical reasons. You fall in love for emotional reasons. And of course, respect has to be there. That's sort of the price of entry. You want to know that someone's reputation, their loyalty, their trust is all intact. But to actually fall in love, to get to the emotional side, that's what has to come through in order to have a wonderful love relationship. So let's look at the other side of love. I call it love's poor cousin, respect. Respect is all the practical stuff. Now, on this Fusion up here, the Fusion Hybrid, it delivers 47 miles per gallon. Respect. The Fusion Energy, 100 miles per gallon equivalent. Respect. 85% of the materials by weight are recyclable. More respect. All of that's wonderful. This car also offers technologies that you would find on cars twice the price. It will adjust the vehicle's speed for changing traffic. It will parallel park itself. Respect indeed. But That's the deal clincher, is the Fusion is also full of passion and sensuality. And it's a design without compromise. It has silhouette innovation, refined surface language, technical graphics, the perceived efficiency, the new face of Ford. And all of that creates a car that is drop-dead gorgeous. So what's the story? It's delivering an absolutely premium driving experience to our mainstream customer. Let's change gears. There's a very attractive 28-year-old woman who lives in Rome. Her life is focused on friends, fun, clubbing, partying. Her name's Antonella. She probably cares more about the design of her cell phone than she does the design of her car. She is extremely image conscious. She's also a completely fictitious imagination, but her influence is definitely real. It is the evidence of the design of the Ford Fiesta that came from Antonella. She's a character invented by our Ford designers in order to figure out the intended customer, what the intended customer embodies. So what we try to do, before to design the car, you have to first design the customer or the driver. Now, the image of a fun-seeker Roman appears to be extreme when it's set in a busy city. In Rome, there's lots of cars, there's lots of very small cars, but a car has to not only be cool and nimble, it has to look the part. And Romans are super image conscious about how their vehicles look. Fiesta ST does exactly that. It answers Antonella's desires for a great looking product. Fear-free, feisty little car with 197 horsepower, so it's really fast. But it also has 34 miles per gallon, and it answers the question of being responsible while also being beautiful. Proof that a small car doesn't have to be all about austerity and sacrifice. It can actually be stylish and fun and fast. And then the last example is a good one. I always think the purist always love the first version of anything that's designed because it's probably the closest to the designer's original vision. But of course, then commerce gets involved, demands upgrades, and the product becomes fatter, and it becomes bigger, and it becomes safer, and it becomes more reliable, but ultimately it becomes less charismatic. But occasionally, very occasionally, we hit the reset button. We make it pure, we make it great, we cut out the fuss, we embrace the story, which brings me to this, which is the 2014 Mustang. And right now, in this year, this horse has everything it needs to justify confidence. Over 5 decades, this has been a symbol of freedom and possibility for millions of people around the world that don't even own one. Mustang transcends generations, demographics, geography, and its bloodline goes all the way back to 1964. GT350, GT500, Boss 302, numerous iterations. This vehicle has also been a powerhouse in the world of entertainment. And get this, almost 3,000 appearances in feature films. And those appearances in feature films made it a part of our cultural fabric. Almost 50 years and 9 million Mustang customers have made this thing a cultural phenomenon. And I think that's a great story in itself. That is 3 very brief stories on how we create automobiles. We can talk about it further in a few minutes. But first, it is my delight to bring up Rachel Shechtman. Thanks.
Good morning, good afternoon almost. So this is me. I was 12 years old, clearly very fashionable. My mom said we were going to New York to go shopping, and we drove up to this big building that was not a shopping mall, but the Jacob Javits Center. Why were we there? Well, my mom had a retail store, so she was there for work, and I was there, of course, to buy bat mitzvah favors wholesale. So I've never been to a trade show before, and aisle after aisle there was all this stuff and people. And I looked at my mom after a few aisles and I said, "You can shop for a living?" So I said, "Sign me up. I know what I want to do when I grow up. I'm going to have a job where I get to shop for a living." So just fast forward a couple of years and I moved to New York, and I'd always see these storefronts and say, I wonder what my store will be. Well, I recently stumbled upon it. It's 2,000 square feet in Manhattan on 10th Avenue and 19th Street. And it's a space that has the point of view of a magazine. It reinvents itself entirely every 4 to 8 weeks like a gallery, and it sells things like a store. So we set out to create a brand that was constant, but always changing. So we worked with Stefan Sagmeister and Jessica Walsh to come up with a name and a brand identity that did exactly that. So of course we called it Story. And what's great about the design and the identity that they came up with is that the O then separates and tells you what story we're telling at any given time. So we've done a love story, we've done a New York story, we've done a home for the holiday story, and a wellness story. And in 16 months, we've done 10 different stories. So the conversation that we've stumbled upon is one in which I call retail media. We're used to seeing ads on TVs, on billboards, all over the place, yet we spend so much time in physical spaces. Why isn't that a media channel? So this is the cover of InStyle's color issue, and this is the cover of our color issue. So what do I mean by retail as media? So in a magazine, you have writers who tell stories, and you have photographers who take pictures, and we do that through merchandising around a certain subject matter in a story. And then we have a publishing side. Companies pay us money, and a lot of money, to access consumers in a subject matter that's relevant to their brand DNA and expertise. So when we did an art story, we brought in art.com as a sponsor. We did a color story, we brought in Benjamin Moore as a partner. But here's what's also interesting. They're not just someone who's writing us a check to have their name on a wall. They're part of the conversation. They are the content. Benjamin Moore knows a lot more about color than I do. And so what we do, we know a little about a lot of things. And then we want to find brands who are experts and know a lot about a few things. So when you open up the cover of that magazine, you have a letter from the editor, you have some editorial pics, an adjacent ad. You go in the store, you have an ad on the wall from Stylement. Adjacent to that, you have their product, and then other merchandise that helps amplify and bring that story to life. So if this is what media looks like in the form of retail, what's retail look like in the form of media? So I got to thinking, right, there's all these new business models online and all this invention everywhere, yet there's not that much reimagining of the physical retail experience. So I say, instead of companies sitting in boardrooms going like this, saying sales per square foot, why don't we look at it like experience per square foot? So right now, if you walked into our store, you'd see his story. And we're working with a small company by the name of Procter & Gamble, and Details Magazine is our co-curator, and a great startup by the name of Birchbox. We have their men's business in there. And 4 days a week, you can come in and you can get a hot towel shave. And you're not just gonna get any shave, you're gonna get to experience the new Braun Cool Tech, which you can't buy on the market anywhere. It will not be available for sale to the public till July, but you can come to this store and get a barber from Frank's Chop Shop on the Lower East Side who will put a warm towel on your face, and you will get to experience this new revolutionary technology before it's available on the market. A funny thing that actually happened organically is we have a lot of interesting partners, and one of our partners is Perch Interactive, and it's a projection technology which invites customers to engage with digital technology in a physical environment. And so this is kind of our Superman table that has the Gillette Pro Glide Fusion razor. So we threw in some of those razors because we had some extra samples into the table, and this was fascinating. We had 20 people on a Saturday huddled while they could figure out whose arm was longest to get in there to get a $14.99 razor. And so I think what's missing and what's exciting to me is this idea of physical engagement and experience. We did a Making Things story with General Electric. Only 25% of our store could you buy something in. 75% was pure experience. There were laser cutters, 3D printers, an injection molding machine. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's a customer of ours daughter. She came back about every other day. And I joked earlier, you know, there's all this controversy around photo retouching in women's bodies and images. And I feel like with some of our pictures, we have to say this has not been retouched to enhance child happiness. So, you know, when you're dealing with a business that's all about change, what's a constant? So a constant that's part of our business model is that every story has content, it has commerce, and it has community. So I'll give you an example of that. How many people here are familiar with Quirky? Okay, so for those of you who aren't, Quirky is a website where when you have that moment when you're like, I wish they made a product that solved this problem or does this, you upload your idea, and if enough people like it, they make it, and you make a percentage. So we had Quirky in our store. This is a 3-in-1 bottle opener. And so we wanted to stay true to what Quirky's story was online. So offline, we took it out of the box. You could experience all the functionality of that product, and then you could read about the maker and the inventor behind that story. Another thing we did was look at one of their products and took merchandise and made it part of our content. So this is a retailer's nightmare. It's a product that you can customize over 150 different ways. And because of that, Quirky can't wholesale it to Target or Best Buy or Bed Bath & Beyond or any of their other retailers because it's physically impossible. So what we did is we got Pratt design students to create a table with the most popular color combinations of these crossovers, and then we videotaped it and amplified the making of that story and how customers engage with that product and then put it back online. And lastly is community. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is if we're in a physical space and we're gonna ask for someone's time, let's give them an experience that they can't get on their own. And so when we thought, okay, how are people gonna invent products in our store from Quirky? Someone's like, well, just put an iPad or a laptop there. I said, well, they can do that at home. So we brought in an illustrator. So you would go in and someone would sketch live your idea for that product, and it would just get scanned and go into the exact same system than if you were sitting at home. But the point of entry for that experience was 100% relevant to where the customers was having that experience. So community has taken a myriad of different forms as we've grown over the past 16 months. So how many are familiar with the term beta? Okay, so for those of you who aren't, beta's a test period. It's that digital companies put it on their site, even American Express, and says, by the way, we're gonna test some things, we're gonna work out some kinks, so give us some permission while we figure it out. So we're the same people who live offline that live online, so we launched in beta. And we worked out some kinks. And we called ourselves a startup store beta, and we sold products from startups. And then what happened is founders of startups came. These are 45 New York tech and startup entrepreneurs getting together to share advice and information with each other. Community takes the form of customers and bringing in locals. This is Nona, an Italian grandmother from Staten Island, who came in to teach people how to make fresh pasta during our New York story. These are our neighborhood friends and customers who set up a 25-cent lemonade stand on the weekends, very profitable in New York. This was a couple who we've never met before, but they felt connected to what we were doing and came into our store and asked if they could take their wedding picture. So, like a media company, people always say, well, who's your demographic? Who's your audience? So it's very narrow. They're between 5 and 80, and it's men, women, and kids. So sometimes I talk about us because really we're just a dating service, and we use storytelling as the matchmaker between brands and consumers. So for our Making Things story, how do you get a kid really excited about a laser cutter and a 3D printer? Well, you make Mr. Potato Head pieces out of a laser cutter so they can pimp their pumpkins. And then how do you get a 32-year-old woman excited about these heavy-duty machinery? You get Rebecca Minkoff, who's a famous women's accessory and handbag designer, to come by, laser etch a handbag, run a social media contest, and a lucky winner will get a one-of-a-kind designer handbag. And the boys are a little easier when it comes to machines. So moving on, we have all these great experiences, all these people coming in and out of our stores. So how do you look at what's successful and how we can react and maximize that experience per square foot? So this is what our store looked like during our art story, and we have a relationship with a company by the name of Prism Skylabs, and there's cameras all over our store. And what you're looking at is a heat map. So this is living A/B testing in a physical space. So we can see which ways people are walking, what they're interested in, what products they're excited about. Basically, it's what hot and what not by a day-to-day basis. And since we're always changing our store design, it's helpful to inform future designs and layouts for a story. And since we engage a lot with our customer, it also helps inform where we position different sales associates. So the last thing I want to touch upon is something that we kind of stumbled upon accidentally. And by opening our doors, we realized if we are like a living magazine, people are going to pitch us, right? And instead of pitching us stories, we're getting pitched products. So during our Making Things story, we had the idea to do a pitch night and say, let's invite everyone to come in and pitch their product. It was from 6 to 8 at night. We had our friends at coolhunting.com come and kind of guest judge with us. We were there till 10:45 at night with 48 pitches, and there was some amazing product. This is one of my favorites. I'm wearing it. This is Beth Macri. You're probably thinking, oh, it's a pretty necklace. Beth is a structural engineer. She has never made a product before. But what it is it's a hidden message. So at the bottom of all of those pieces are letters. And then Whoopi Goldberg bought one, and we got her on The View, and she got enough business from her relationship with Story and some of the opportunities and doors we opened for her that she is now doing this full time. And I was just saying at dinner last night, to me I look, when something resonates, why is it resonating? And to me it's kind of like a living Kickstarter. This is a moment of that. So when you stop and you think, what does lemonade stands and jewelry and shaving have in common? And at the end of the day, they all have a story. And you're probably sitting there and thinking, well, what's her next story? Well, in the same way you don't know what's on the cover of the next magazine, you'll have to wait and find out, and I hope you all come and visit. So I want to invite the rest of the panel up here.
Wasn't that fabulous?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to kick us off. I want one of you, I can't remember who, used the phrase making stuff up. And one of the things that people who tell stories with design do is there comes a moment when you say, there isn't a dummy's guide on how to do this. I can't steal this from BMW. I'm about to make something up. And I'd love for each of you to talk about whether you have a practice for doing that, whether it just comes to you, whether I imagine Ford has more than just one person designing everything.
No, I'm the other one.
How do you, it's hard, it's scary. How do you do it?
Well, we do a lot of sort of analysis about what's out there that's outside the auto industry. So, to your point about BMW, it's of no point for me to go online and say, well, what's BMW doing? They're making luxury cars. That's kind of interesting, but I don't want to do a BMW, so why would I look at their cars? What I am interested in is the luxury lifestyle. And what do customers see in BMW? Well, they probably see very similar things in other fields. They probably have a very similar interest in luxury restaurants, luxury hotels, luxury travel, luxury destinations, luxury clothing. I can go down the list. And then you ask, well, what kind of luxury? And then you're starting to zero in on sort of the information that you're looking for. And then you do an audit of everything that you can possibly think of that's relegated to the type of luxury in this particular case that you're looking for. And then you put that up on the wall and you start to get your designers involved to say, where's the thread that ties all this together? And how does this relate back to the type of product that we're about to do? And then you have a foundation on which to build your story.
Love that. Dear Ward.
In movies, I mean, really what we're doing is we're telling stories that we want to tell. It's pretty simple. I mean, we are a director-driven studio, which is unusual in film. Normally, it's sort of committee or it's a producer-driven studio. We're a director-driven studio, so that means it's the director's vision, his or her personal vision, their story they want to tell, and our studio gets behind that person's vision and helps them tell that story. That's pretty simply the way.
So if I'm a director at Pixar, it's my job. I'm not a freelancer like any other studio.
Right.
How long before I am expected to come to the team and say, here's my story? Do I have a week or a year? Or?
You could be a co-director first. You could work on somebody else's story first. But when you have an idea, it's put in the hopper. And basically, we ask typically a director to come forward with 3 ideas, not one. And you have to be willing to be open to the fact that they may pick the story you don't like. You may have this, this is the one I want to make. This is the story I want to tell. And they gravitate towards this third one. So you got to make sure you like all 3 of them.
Sure.
So then once they pick, you know what, Seth, we love your story about garbage cans coming to life. Great, let's do that. You go into a development process where they pair you with a producer, a story person, and the 3 or 4 of you get together and you start baking this thing into what could be possibly a movie idea, and it grows from there.
And what I think you're slightly bearing the lead here, which is that there's a development process.
Absolutely.
Everyone in this room makes content at some level,
Right.
but we feel like we're getting paid to type, or getting paid to press the trigger on a camera, as opposed to develop. And sometimes it takes 10 years to write a book. Sometimes it takes more than an hour to write a blog post. And that's the work. Everything else is just the execution. And I love the fact that Pixar has been very intentionally, to the extent of even moving the bathrooms farther away so that people have to walk past each other.
That's right.
That's part of the job.
Yeah, it's a big thing because we have technology, we have a lot of very technical people, and we have a lot of very creative people. And sometimes people don't see them as one, creative and technology. Those two have to be married together. You have to have the art inspiring the technology, and then the technology basically telling the story for art. So these two have to work together.
Yeah.
That connectivity is what Steve envisioned from the beginning.
Exactly. And then Rachel, how much of your time do you spend keeping the thing running, and how much of your time do you get to spend making stuff up?
Well, right now I'm spending most of my time keeping things running, and I wish I was spending less time doing that. But I think when I think of making stuff up, it's kind of part collector and part chef. And I think what I mean by that is I love cherry picking, right? I'm not a tech person, but I like going to tech conferences or learning about science and kind of cherry picking elements from different worlds so that when we meet with co-curators or partners or different sponsors, what they'll then, in terms of making a story up, they'll say, well, we're interested in telling a conversation about making things. And so then taking all those different things that I've collected and putting them in a bucket with this little idea and then seeing what we come up with is really kind of an accidental process.
But accidental on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the two other things I want to talk about before we open it up for questions, so I hope you're thinking hard about your questions. Michael Schrage wrote a great short book last year about the fact that what great brands do is they actually change their users. They change their audience. And then I was 20 pages in and a little lost, and then I finally understood what he was getting at. He used the Apple example. That Apple has been on a path for 25 years to change its customers into people who have better taste. Because if they succeed at that, you will want more of what they make. And then if they can raise the bar for what it is to have good taste, and Steve was famous for turning to Bill Gates at an event saying the problem is you guys don't have good taste, right? And that, once you understand that, you can see the arc of Apple making a lot of sense. So the question I would ask each of the three of you is, what change are you trying to make in the people you interact with?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's an accidental change, but I think one that excites me is to have more meaning from, how we spend our time. And I feel like time is the ultimate luxury. So whether you're in a supermarket or whether you're buying pet food, how can you make that experience and the time that you're spending have more meaning? And so I'd say that's important.
I like that. J Mays.
You get the customer you deserve. And I think you have to really think about that.
Yeah.
We love our Ford mainstream customers, but I'm always wanting more people to come into the fold. So the Fusion that I showed you a little bit earlier is a great example. We spend a lot of time on that vehicle, making it feel premium, upscale, beautiful, attractive, something that you would gravitate toward. And the proof is in the pudding that we now run 3 shifts on that vehicle, 24 hours a day, and we cannot make enough of them. But much more important, and to your question, is that it's not how many we're selling, but who we're selling them to. So Ford, having been in the United States forever, a very well-respected Midwestern brand, hadn't had a lot of success out on the coast or in the Southeast, where people buy traditionally Japanese or German. Well, Fusion hybrid sales in San Francisco are up 479%. 479%. And the cool part about that is the people that are gravitating to it are coming from BMWs and Audis and Mercedes. Same thing, almost exactly the same percentage happening in Los Angeles and in Miami. And when you get the other kind of customers that are gravitating toward your brand, it suddenly starts to open up a completely different dialogue among the people that are maybe mainstream customers, but that aren't currently shopping your brand. That's how you do it.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. For Pixar, it's difficult because we have people that love our movies, and we pride ourselves on making films that work for both the adults and for the kids, that they work at both levels, because the parents have to watch the movies with their kids, and of course we have adult fans who have no kids that love our movies. So we every movie that we make, we don't set out to make a child's film, a children's film. We set out to tell a great story, to make a great movie that happens to be an animated film and that happens to work for the whole family, that is a universal storytelling. If you look at movies 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, actually before we had the rating system, everything had to be rated G. And there were adult themes and non-adult themes, but the movies had to be universally appealing. And that's something that we seek to do with Pixar films, making films that are universally appealing.
I would say one of the changes you're trying to make is you're trying to make the viewer happier and kinder. There's not a lot of cynicism in your movies.
Yeah, we try to stay away from that. I mean, part of that is, and having children, you have children, you watch some movies with your kids and you see that they react or act out from what they see. And you have a chance to sit somebody down for an hour and a half and give them a message, a great message. And that's a big responsibility that we do take seriously.
I love the fact that there's no humor at someone else's expense in a Pixar film, and that's an absolute delight. However, you still do quite a lot of fart jokes.
Yeah, people love those. I don't know. I don't know why they love them, but they do.
One of the things that J Mays touched on is one of the things that it means to make design that really matters is to have the guts to say to someone, it's not for you. To be able to say, okay, I get that you don't like this. I get that you don't want to buy this. That's okay. It's not for you. And then you can turn to somebody else and say, here, I made this. And if you're not willing to do that, if you need to be mass and please everyone, it's almost impossible to do anything called design. The third thing I want to bring up, and then we'll do the questions, is when we touched on this with the group earlier this morning. There is no design until you ship. If it's not in the world, if the store is still under construction, if the car is still in development, it doesn't exist. There is no design. So what's the practice like of whether you're dealing with a license or a theme park or whatever? How do you galvanize the troops to say, it's done, this is going to leave the shop? You guys don't even have to say anything. We can just go on, but I'm just putting it on.
Well, there was a quote when I was still in college, and I was at an event with my mom, and I heard a very simple quote, and it was, if you go for 100%, you're never going to get there, so go for 80% with 20% room for improvement. And I think, as a child, learning from looking at different things, I saw lots of people around me always going for 100% and never starting anything. And so it might not be perfect, and we might even know where there might be things we could have done differently, but every time we get smarter and better. And so I think it's going for the 80%, knowing that we're always going to strive for the 100, but we're going to go for the 80.
God, I live in a crazy world. Ford is a big, well-oiled machine. Just let me give you 1 minute on this. We'll produce a car for 6 years. Loads of money, billions goes into the factory to produce all of the manufacturing capability necessary to produce cars that roll out 24 hours a day. We start planning for the next one the moment the first one's already finished. So I already know what's going to be more or less 6 years down the road, and I'm planning on that with designers right now. I also have a finite timeline that I have to get to, because if that design is not finished, for every day that I miss launching the next car, it's millions lost. So we have a very strict product development system that we meet gateway after gateway after gateway, which brings me back then to your question, which is, and you touched on this, get everything up on the wall early. Know that you've got something worth developing, because if you get through the entire gateway and you still don't have a story, you are in a big heap of trouble. So you want to know that the entire product development process is just essentially executing this extraordinary story that you've got to tell.
Exactly. Sprint at the beginning, sprint in the middle, and sprint at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we have these gates for story approval at Pixar, and basically you have the whole film at some point. Your goal is to get your whole movie up on reels. You have a release date for the movie, the date you know that movie has to come out, and you can work backwards from that and know how many sequences you should be approving as you go. And we've been in the instance more than once where we looked and went, it's not gonna happen. That movie's not coming out. So that's when you have to hit that panic button, you get more people involved, and you get that story figured out and get it right, and you have to hit those gates. Otherwise, you have to move the release date. And for us, it's the same thing. It's dire consequences financially to move the date of a film release.
And nothing feels worse than having top management come in. You're very excited about the design, and they just go.
Yeah. Exactly. What's for lunch? All right, who's got some questions? We have microphones if you didn't bring your own. Yes, over here, we'll bring you the microphone, sir. Next time you guys should bring
Your iPhone is
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Joe. This is sort of directed to J Mays and the Pixar guy. I know, I have a kid. Sorry.
Jay Ward.
J1,
Okay.
J2.
Think
All
forward.
right, Pixar guy, that works.
I have a 10-year-old who's not really a car geek, despite my best efforts, but he loves cars, he watches the movies, he has all the toys and all that. Do you see the kind of design language, the sort of chunkiness and friendliness of the Cars universe influencing car design yet? Or do you think that's something that's coming, or do you think it's something that's totally irrelevant?
Well, I can probably answer that, because when you guys were coming into our design studio and learning about the design process, we learned easily as much, if not more, from Pixar when they came into our design studios. And my roots are in German design, so I grew up learning my craft at Audi. But when I came back to the United States, I came up with this term called animated geometry, which is to take geometric forms and actually give them some life so that they move. You guys are geniuses at that. They do it, and then they make it move, and then they tell a story around that. So I think if you can start to understand basic geometry, at the other end of the spectrum, you've got some sort of amorphic blob there. Somewhere in between there is a shape that's going to communicate what you want it to communicate.
Yeah, I think part of also what resonates with your child is that the Pixar cars are not cars. They're characters. They're living characters that happen to be cars. I was telling somebody the funny story about working with Mattel, a big toy company. We went to go have them make the die-cast cars for the movie, and your son has these. We've sold 150 million of these die-cast cars. And at the time, John Lasseter had to talk Mattel into making these die-cast cars because they wanted to make Hot Wheels-sized cars with no faces. And we said, no, no, no. It's a living character. It has a face on it. It's alive. It's taller. It's bigger. We don't want it to work with Mattel track sets because they live in their own world. They're living characters. They're not cars. They are characters that happen to be cars. And they just could not imagine that. And they literally threw us a bone and made the first 6 characters in the set, which sold out so quickly that their heads spun off and fell on the floor. And then they scrambled back to us and said, what can we do next? And from there, the die-cast world changed. And it was because of John Lasseter's vision of making a character. Your child doesn't look at that and go, oh, that's a red race car. He says, no, that's Lightning McQueen. He doesn't look at a brown tow truck. That's Mater. They know these characters. That's what we have to do, is make that connection so that a child understands who that character is.
And what you said, you used the phrase, could not imagine that. And every design innovation you have ever admired is something that someone along the way could not have imagined. And we look at and laugh at people at Mattel for being such lunkheads. If Pixar says something, you should just say yes. But no, they couldn't imagine it. That's how you know you're doing good work. If there aren't critics in your shop who say, no, I can't imagine that working, then you're not actually doing good work. Next question, please. In the center in the back. You can just speak loudly. I'll repeat you.
Ben Goldstein, Break Media. This question's for Jay Ward. I'm always interested in the new professions that media creates, especially as we travel deeper in the 21st century here. How does one become a legacy guardian, and how does that role evolve over the years?
First of all, it's a totally made-up title.
Absolutely. There's a legacy.
Yeah, legacy is a cool name. I was given a foam sword and a foam shield when I got the job. It was awesome. No. What happened to us was that we were purchased by Disney in 2006, actually the year Cars came out. And Pixar was the little engine that could. We were the little studio that made stuff work. We're just a film studio. All we do is make movies. We don't do anything else. We don't have a big marketing team, a big PR team. We have a very small group of those people. Primarily, we're filmmakers. Disney bought us. Disney's a much bigger unit, right? And they have a lot of mouths to feed. They have theme parks and video games and publishing and all these other things. And what we saw happening in the early days was Cars became successful, really successful, especially in those other realms beyond the movie. And they were just making whatever they wanted to make without including us. And that's when John Lasseter said, I don't want that. They need to go through us. I want that conduit. I want you to be the eyes and ears for me on all these things that are just slipping past because we're so busy making movies. So it was something new that we had to think of. It was a new role in our studio to go, yes, movies are valued, being a filmmaker is valued, but these things that come out that represent our films are equally as valuable to us. Let's make sure that we give credit to those as well.
Great question. Right next to you.
Hi,
Yes, young lady, how are
Jill
you?
Tracy.
You definitely do not need a microphone.
Yes,
Like that.
exactly. Cox Media Group. I'm a radio personality. My question is for Rachel. Rock star, first of all.
Yeah.
And secondly, what is the thought of expanding your brand? Does it just become bigger in New York? Do you go around the world with it? Or what are your thoughts?
That's the million-dollar question right now. But I think there's so many different things you can do with it. I think story, and thank you by the way for the compliment. I think story, the way that it was birthed and how it exists now in New York on 10th Avenue and 19th, is only going to work in so many markets. And in the U.S., maybe top 10, but maybe not even. And I think we're talking to brands about doing pop-up stories, and so maybe we go somewhere and for 5 days story is we're talking to a big brand about doing that at Ad Week, and we do a different story every day for 5 days of Ad Week. But maybe in Miami in a shopping mall there's
I'm in Miami. That's what made me think about it. We are like right for it. We're just like sitting right on it.
but I also think it doesn't have to be the way that it is right now, right? So if the core is content, commerce, and community, it's about that, and so change can take multiple forms. So you could have a permanent version of story that was her story, and it's just shot for women, and everything in it always changes, but it's always her story. And so the question is, we're figuring that out right now, but the goal is to amplify it both digitally and physically in many places.
That's a beautiful problem to have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, what do you guys do when you have a bad story? For J Ward, maybe someone coming in, we want to do X with the brand, and you look at it, no, but you value that person, the value designer who comes in and doesn't hit the mark that day in the auto, or in your case with retail, they want to put something in your store, and you look at it and it's like going, no. But you want to maintain the relationship and you want to cultivate. How do you bring up, because how are you developing storytellers? Because a lot of times people have raw skills, but I don't see them have storytelling ability. How are you working on that?
If you want to do this professionally, you have to understand the work is not the person, and that it is okay to criticize the work because you're not criticizing the person. The professional has to be able to accept that. So sometimes you have to work with amateurs and first teach people that rejecting the project is not rejecting the person. But once you're working with professionals and you figure out how to create this cycle of criticism, that's how I can have an editor who I work with years and years in a row. Because when she hates page 17, she doesn't hate me. Right? And getting that groundwork established early is critical. If any of you guys want.
I was going to say almost the same thing. If you're thin-skinned or think you've got the design answer and don't want anyone to touch it, you're going to fail. So I always take the approach that if you really want to compliment on your design, call your mom up. And she will love it every time. The way we work is very similar to what Seth's just described, and things that Jay's also touched on. Everything gets tossed on the table as quickly as possible. We rip it to shreds, we sketch over it, we mess with it, we ask how it could be better. We see if there's a grain of an idea in there that we could expand and grow. But if anyone doesn't want to be participating as a group like that, they're probably in the wrong business.
And really quick, just from Pixar's perspective, remember I said how far away we are from Hollywood, both physically and metaphorically? That culture is not as prevalent where we are, where one person is doing the thing they're going to do. It's a very it's a dirty process where we all throw our things in, and even if it's a director in the studio with his idea, but he has to be willing to just throw children out. I mean, it happens a lot. These babies that you love. What happens is you have this nugget that you love in the story, this one element that you love, and you keep it in, you keep it in, you keep it in. But if the movie evolves and that nugget doesn't work anymore, you have to cut this favorite part out and be willing to throw it away. That's part of our process. The film that you see at the end is never what the director started with, ever. And that's part of the thing, that you have to have that thick skin to move along with it and be willing to make those changes for the good of making a great movie in the end.
Okay, in the front row, and then we'll do it right there. We have a microphone right there. Thanks, Anthony.
Tony Forte, Urban Professor. Quick question in reference to storytelling, right? A lot of brands are actually doing better jobs with storytelling. However, sometimes the issue is the delivery. So you can tell a great story per se with Ford, but does that reach the auto dealer? So the end consumer doesn't really even get the story. You have some brands that make multiple product, or many are huge assortments, where key products get the story, but then other ones don't.
Yeah.
What is some of your advice when you're dealing with broader brands to be able to tell the story so the end consumer gets it, particularly when you have media that's diverting the attention in many different ways?
One comment I would just make on that. So what led up to Story was I became an accidental consultant 12 years ago, mashing up marketing, merchandising, and business development strategies. And whether we worked with companies that were big, like Kraft Foods and JCPenney, or startups, it was all a very similar challenge, and they both had one thing in common. It's like a United Nations without a translator. And so marketing speaking Japanese, and finance is speaking Swahili, and PR is speaking Taiwanese, and no one's translating. And I see this all the time where we'll have big companies write us a check and sponsor our store, and then I'm like, you haven't tweeted about this in 3 weeks, and you've invested all this money and resources, why aren't you doing it? And then they see it and they're like, oh, we should have done this. And so, in my opinion, both on the consulting side and then the recipient of kind of media dollars, I think where success can be had is if you rewind and get people involved in the beginning, even if they're not going to be active in the nascent part of that idea or relationship, and they'll be engaged 2 months, a year later, at least they feel like they were part of it and not an afterthought, and feel more like a stakeholder is kind of what I've seen in my world.
I think in our world, your idea has to have an umbilical connection back to the history of the brand. And so if I go back to Henry and some of Seth's comments about the democratization of transportation, the democratization of mobility, and putting as many people on wheels as possible, that is the foundation that 100 and some odd years later, we still build from. So when you look at brands, many brands in Germany, those are elitist brands. We are a populist brand. And so we try to create products that are democratized for as many people as possible. And then the connection to that are some of the vehicles that I've just shown you. So I love the idea of the democratization of premium luxury products and giving it into the hands of as many people as possible. So if we can create a premium experience, but a mainstream customer only pays a mainstream price, then we've done our job.
I'd add a couple things. First of all, marketing is now the product. That didn't used to be true, right? St. Pauli Girl, Beck's Light, which do you like better? Turns out, same beer, same brewery, same assembly line. But now, the product itself is the marketing, not the wrapper we're putting around it. But the second half of it, as Scott Monty has shown at Ford, is when everybody owns their own media channel, everyone's a media company. So no longer are there all these filters. If you want to speak up, here's a microphone, go ahead and speak up. So the brand has a responsibility to speak directly to the consumer with as few filters as possible. And a lot of brands are resisting that. They're afraid, but the ones who are stepping into it and saying, here, I made this, and I'm speaking directly to you, by removing the filters, they're able to be more consistent with the story they tell. We had a question right here on the aisle.
So in today's world where everybody has a voice thanks to social media and Twitter, any advice for maintaining control of the story? I think we've seen a lot of examples where brands have lost control of their story recently. So any words on that?
Well, I can tell you how we keep control of our brand. We are not customer-led, we're customer-informed. We are brand-led. So we have a point of view, but we are informed by the type of customers that we ultimately want to sell to. And I think as long as you're customer-informed, the customer doesn't completely take over the brand. You know the information that you need, but then you're able to have a point of view about your brand.
You know, they don't call it free controlled by brand media, they call it social media. You can't be in it and insist on controlling the conversation. You must give that up. You can control the promises you make. You can control the products you make. But the reaction and the conversation about it is out of your control. And the minute that Pixar tries to control what people say after they see a movie is the minute that the whole thing falls apart. They can't play at that level. So part of it is getting rid of the thin skin that so many marketers have, I'm in that category, and saying, you know what? go ahead, have a conversation, but it's your conversation. This is my product, my brand, my promise. Those are two separate things. Yes, sir.
Hi, Giorgio Cervoncini with Impulso Mag. I'm hearing all the strategies for the potential of a good story, of a good product, a good retail establishment. Yet some retail products do not sell very well, some cars do not sell very well, and some movies are not selling, as well as some books. What do you do? I mean, how do you go back and start analyzing and say, this is what we went wrong within the system? And then what do you do to try to correct that system?
That is a great question. I always make the analogy between film and automobiles, and I always say that film is telling a story by either animating it, in Jay's case, or putting it on film or digital, and we tell a story by bending sheet metal. Most films are just crappy special effects, things blow up, and there's no story. You go in 5 minutes after you leave the theater, you'll never think about them again. Compare that to what he's been showing and the library that Pixar has put together. It's the same thing with automobiles. Most automobiles are crappy special effects, and you never think a thing about them. They're either so over the top that they're trying too hard to get your attention, or they're so dull that they're just simply commodities like a washing machine. So you've got to find a story in order to engage people. And then once you engage your customer, tell that same story over and over and over again, because it becomes part of their life as well.
And I think part of what you're saying is you've had cars that haven't met your
I
expectations.
have made some terrible.
But they're bumps in the road of a longer arc,
Yeah.
right? And it's that notion that you stand for something makes it much easier. So you guys have learned some tactical things, but you haven't changed the mission of the studio.
Yeah, there's always learnings along the way. There's things that we obviously didn't do right, we didn't get right. We've been very fortunate because we take our time. There's two things that Pixar doesn't do very well: fast and cheap. We're really slow, we're really expensive, but it works for what we're doing, and that's what we keep trying to do, is do the best possible thing. We have enough time. What we all agree on, what we all hold hands on, is that if it's not right, we don't release it to the world. If we don't feel happy about it, we try to do that, and that comes from that brain trust of people we have inside that are honest with each other about that.
Tactically, positive cash flow makes it much easier to do a certain kind of art and storytelling. Interestingly, Pablo Picasso painted 10,000 paintings, and only 100 of them were among the greatest paintings of all time. So the fact that there's people who want to do business with your hits makes it easier for you to experiment with your misses. Right? And I think that Ford is in a golden age right now because of their diligence, and the fact that they've stuck with this gives them the freedom today, because they're making a living, to go closer to the edges and right to where they want to be. Whereas if they were struggling hand to mouth, it's a lot harder to pull it off. In the center here, sir. But wait for a microphone, okay? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Julio Rivas, Youth and News. But how many times success is an accident and failure is another accident?
Oh, I think the act of design is taking credit for your lucky accidents and getting over the unlucky accidents as fast as you can. Anyone who comes to you and says, I'm always getting it right, is lying to you. And that what you see, whether it's Milton Glaser doing graphic design or someone in politics doing conversation design, is the same thing, which is no one knows the answer, ever. Even Warren Buffett gets stocks wrong. It's, have I structured a world where I can leverage the wins in a way to keep this story going and survive the losses? I don't think any of us have said we know how to do it. We just know that we can take credit for enough wins along the way that we get to come talk about it.
Only thing I would add to that, excuse me, Joe, go ahead.
No, I was
The only thing I would add to that is when we've got a design developing in the studio, you know when it's percolating. And you know by the amount of people that are coming into the studio to stand around and look at it, if it's going to be something that's quite special. And the last, a bit like the senior management comment, the last thing you want is to be working away on a car that you think's good, and it's just like Gone with the Wind in the studio. There's no one there. There's no one interested. That's a very good piece of market research.
Did you want it? You're good? No. Okay, we have time for two more. Way in the back. We'll do you in a second, but we have a microphone over here, and then we'll come back there.
You all talked about failing early, failing quickly, getting past it, moving on to something. What are the failures that you've had that you look back on now and say, maybe that wasn't such a bad idea? Anyone?
I think we've had a lot of films in development at Pixar that were really great ideas, but for one reason or another, they didn't come to fruition. We had a film called Newt that was a really cool story about this blue-footed newt trying to find the love of his life, and we had announced it, and it went pretty far. It was 2 years in. The director is Gary Rydstrom, who's an amazing sound designer who's done almost all the sound design for us. He did a short film for us called Lifted. It was one of those movies where everything was there that it should have been a great movie, but for some reason, I was talking earlier about how you have to start getting sequences approved, right? Like you have Act 1, 2, and 3 with sequences. You got to get them approved if your movies come out there, and nothing was getting approved. Here was this great idea. The concept was great. We all got it. This is awesome, but nothing was getting approved. And so at some point, you have to say, for whatever reason, this has to go on the shelf, because you can only go so far before you have to let go and focus back on the ones that are working. So that it definitely happens.
I want to make sure we have time for this gentleman in the back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Jeffrey Powers with Geekazine. My question is about with the story. What happens if the story that you tell is it kind of gets mocked? It kind of gets like for instance, a good story right now is iOS 7. iOS 7, everybody's saying, oh, it looks too much like Android. That's their story right now. So what do you do to kind of do quality control or kill the fire before it happens or after it happens?
Well, let's go back to the weird chart that I started with, right? It's fabulous that a certain group of people is mocking iOS 7 because it means they did something worth talking about, and they did something that, when it works, people can say, oh, I had no idea it was going to work. Your question, though, I think, is how do you do fire control when it starts to go viral if this thing is in trouble?
Yeah.
Well, if we think again about this curve, there isn't one market. There are many markets. And what we have to do is focus on the people who are on our side, not try to persuade the non-believers. That, as Charlie the Unicorn says, you shun the non-believers and try instead to give a platform to the people who do get the joke. Try to get those people to be able to have a place where they can talk about it and reinforce one another. Social media doesn't make it easy at all to tamp down people. If you don't like the speech that's going on, you can't get rid of it. What you can do is amplify the good speech. And that's what we're seeing over and over again online.
I have a very simple test we do with the designers when they come with an idea. There's 3 questions. Is your idea true to the brand? In other words, does it say something about the brand? Does it build on the brand? Is it differentiated from competition? Back to the comments we were making about getting it out on the edge. Because if it's not differentiated from competition, no one's going to notice it. And the most important is it meaningful to the customer? It's fine having something that's true to the brand and differentiated from the competition, but if no one cares, it won't matter. Art that only appeals to 6 people ain't art.
Bravo. On that note, we're going to stop. Thank you guys for coming.